Hello, welcome to the second discussion of In Cold Blood by Truman Capote.
Okay, so in this discussion, you Miss as to why we are doing this video again for the second time. The first time we did it, there was a technical glitch in the screen recording of the entire discussion, and we didn't realize that till after we had finished the discussion. And so we had everyone together for the first one, and we're going to submit that one to you so you can see for yourself the technical glitch, and we are going to redo it. Doing this discussion. I'm Autumn Avalon.
I'm Avery Glenn.
I'm Gabbie Armenteros.
And I'm Amelia Frost.
So, in the second third of In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, we see the aftermath of the murder, and how the detectives are trying to figure out who killed them, and we see how people react to it. But not only that, we also get to dive into the life of the two murderers, Dick and Perry, and we see their childhood and how they were raised and how they become murderers, basically. We see that they, Perry was a veteran, but he went to jail, and we just see all these things so that we can understand how they got to the point where they met, and then how they learned about the what's their names? The people who got murdered. The Clutters. And we see how they got to the farm on that night and ended up murdering them.
Yeah, adding on to what Avery said, I think Truman Capote, his whole point of the second third of this book, which was basically to give the reader an idea, a more personal explanation about the background, like Avery said, of the characters, Dick and Perry, who are the murderers in this story. And then at the beginning of the first third of the book, they basically set it up. Capote organizes it as he wants the reader to know what has happened. So he basically sets the scene for the reader in the first third of the book, and he gives us an idea as to who the Clutters are, and we know who the murderers are. We know it's Dick and Perry, but we don't know why they did it, and we don't know how they did it. So it doesn't really give us an answer right away, and he sets it up kind of building suspense on it. And then the second third of the book that we just finished reading was he gives us a background knowledge as to more information in the characters, kind of allowing the reader to see who they are and what sort of drove them to committing this crime and this horror on this family, even though it wasn't. We don't know the connections yet. He hasn't given us all the ideas and connected all the dots for us, but I'm hoping he'll do that in the next third of the book, the final third, give us the answer we were looking for.
So in the second third of the book, Capote really focuses on the murderers more than anything else, and I think that's what really makes this unique from other murder cases that have been written about. Like, he, instead of making it this, who are the murderers, he introduces them right away. And besides just telling us about who was murdered, how they were murdered, he wants to focus on the background of the murderers. And I think that was a really essential part of the book, because he wants to give insight into the nature of American violence. It says that on the back of the novel, and I think that's his ultimate goal in this book, is to talk about how people get, basically, I would say it's more like psychological. It's the backgrounds of people that really affect their behavior, and I think that his goal is to focus on their backgrounds in order to help the audience understand more about why they murdered. So he really took more of a focus on Perry than Dick. Do y'all all agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really liked how.
I think. Oh, good. Sorry.
Sorry. I really liked how in this section, like, we got to learn more about them, because, like you said, we talked more, or Capote talked more about Perry. I really enjoyed learning about where he came from, and like hearing the interview, or reading the interview between like his parents or his dad, and like just seeing the connection that they had, and it makes you have a stronger connection to them. Like, we know he's a murderer, and we don't necessarily feel bad for him, but we almost sympathize with his journey there, because he had a rough go of it. Like, no connection with his mother, really, and he went with his father, and then all of his siblings died except for one. And
yeah, they were all suicidal.
I love just being able to see their background instead of saying, oh, like, the journey before. Like, Capote writes it really interestingly. He doesn't just do like the journey before the murder and how they got there. He started school age, they met and everything, which is really interesting, and it makes you like connect to them more. And he did this in the first third too. He made you connect with the characters. His characterization throughout the whole book, I'm assuming in the third he'll do this too. His characterization is like really strong, because he did that with Nancy and like everyone in the Clutters, how he really described them so that we would feel sympathetic for them and mourn their death, even though we don't actually know them. But he wrote them like we did, which I think is like really cool, I guess.
I agree. Some characterization that Capote really does a lot of indirect characterization. He does not make anything like clear. He's not saying that because he doesn't put himself into this, so he obviously has to use indirect characterization. But one thing that I thought was really like an important quote is that when he talks about Perry's sister, he writes,
the letter.
It's actually not the letter part. It's when they when the investigators go and see his sister. It says,
what page?
It's on page 187. It says, in his expression, Mrs. Johnson saw or imagined she saw not gratitude but arrogance, and in place of pride, immense conceit. And I think this is one of the most important places that Capote describes Perry, because he essentially he's really full of himself, and that he never blames anyone else. Do y'all agree with that? And and I think that's like, it also comes from his childhood and partially from him being in the military. I think that he got a lot of pride, and he thinks much of himself, and that he's capable of anything, if you get what I mean. And he blamed his father on not giving him an education, and that it was his fault. And he's just, there's a lot wrong with him. And if you were to see him on the street, you really wouldn't notice. And you
think it's a normal person.
You think he's a normal person, because that one guy that picked Dick and Perry up off the road that they were planning on killing, he just picked them up on the side of the road thinking that they just needed to get one place to the other, not thinking twice about it, that they were murderers. And I think that's very, like, that makes almost Perry even more scary than, like, other murderers that clearly, like, you know, seem like murderers, is because you just wouldn't expect that, you know?
That reminds me, the first, like, the packet that we did for the first third, it was like, how does this impact, or how does this make you, like, change your way of thinking? I'm pretty sure it was, like, the last question. Little packet.
I know what you're talking about.
How he looks like a normal person, like, that kind of makes you think, like,
it's more creepy. It sinks in a little bit
like,
deeper.
Like, oh, like, I pass hundreds of people every single day. Like, it just kind of makes you think, like, oh.
I think it, like, impacts the reader a little bit more.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Definitely makes you connect.
I think it's really sad that... Oh, you can go.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to not move on, but I do want to note the letter.
Definitely. I was going to talk about
the letter.
Sister, so note it.
Yeah, the letter from his sister when Perry was in prison. And I liked the analysis from his prison mate that he made for him after reading the letter. And, like, I think, and how, you guys know how she, like, indirectly insults the letter, opens the letter with these are the kids, like, this is what's happening on the outside world. It's very friendly, and then it gets more and more insulting as she, like, continues well, not insulting, but, like, indirectly insults him and kind of, like, shows her jealousy towards him because he was his father's favorite, in the sense that, like, when his parents split, or he was chosen by his dad to live with his dad, and his dad chose Perry over the other kids, obviously, and his brothers, or I don't know, his other siblings were suicidal, and she was the one that was, I guess you could say, normal, because she felt like she had a lot of stability in her life, being the one that she had family, house, a husband with a job, and here Perry is the one that was the favorite in prison, you know, and he didn't have a lot going for him. And I think that the prison mate's analysis on page 144, number 3, he wrote, she feels that you are leaning too heavily towards self-pity, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying about Amelia, about blame, like he doesn't take blame, and that you are too calculating, and that you are really undeserving of an 8-page letter written in between motherly duties, because she does note that, like, oh, I'm continuing this letter after giving my kids a bath, you know, she just shows how jealous she is and kind of critical, almost. I guess you could say.
She kind of makes it where she's almost ashamed, because I can't remember if it was in her letter. I think it was in the prison mate's analysis. He says something like she's trying to make herself look good. Like, I have these kids. I have this. Like, almost like I don't have a connection to you. Like, I promise I'm normal.
Separate.
Like,
I'm separate.
Because it gets read by, like, the guards or something like that. It's censored. I can't remember exactly what how they put it.
Yeah.
But she's trying to, like, keep the family name clean, because she
doesn't want to associate with that.
Yeah, she doesn't want to.
Yeah, she embodies conventionalism, and I think that's really important to note. Is that Perry says that even the word conventionalism is used on the same page 144. It starts on page 133, 43. He goes, what could be more natural than that she would resent an unconventional person? There's considerable hypocrisy in conventionalism. And that basically, like, he is thinking that, how do I put this? He just does not like her sister, and y'all all clearly saw that too, is he hated her after reading the letter. It did not, she was trying to convince him to, like, change, and that obviously did not work at all. He was very upset after reading the letter, and it definitely, when he had his friend make this analysis of the letter, he said that, read it again, that she resents an unconventional person, which is basically Perry. So, anyways, I also think
I'm going to go back to what Gabbie said in the first discussion. Do you guys remember her mentioning that his sister couldn't trust him? Or do you guys remember the quote where he came to her house and she couldn't trust him to enter the house? And I think, like you said, noting, like, how he hated her after the letter, it, like, almost drove a wedge between them.
Yeah. That
was already there. It just kind of, like, deepened that, I think. Also, I want to know, I don't remember who it was that said it in the first discussion about Dick being something about being his boredom. Right. And, like, I think how that kind of drove him to being crazy. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Let me see if I can find it.
And how, like, yeah, okay. So, like, how, I do want to mention his him with little girls. That kind of bothered me
Yes,
a
that
lot.
bothered me too.
Irked me.
Ugh. I get that just ugh.
It just gives you chills, like, because the way Capote describes Perry, he describes him like as a normal person. I mean, you look at Perry. If you didn't know, you would think Perry's completely normal, which is what really irks you.
Mhm.
But when you look at Dick, you almost, because he bounces around a lot. Like when they went to Mexico, he had nothing to tie him down. He was ready to leave.
He blew the money.
Right.
Mhm.
And he just didn't, and I think he, like, because he bounced around a lot, and I think that's because he got bored easily, and he also was really bad with money, and he was just ready to drop everything and leave. And with Perry, he had more sentimental attachment, which I think is able to describe him as more normal than Perry, who seems a little bit more psychotic and crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree. On page 201, it says that he never admitted this. It says sexual interest in female children because other people might not think it normal, which the way this is worded, it's like, and he thinks that it should be considered normal, and I think that's a really it's a disturbing behavior, and I think that Capote mentioning this also causes the audience to like truly see who they are, because throughout this they don't really seem like bad people, because in the first third, when they're getting ready, when they're getting the supplies to murder them, they really don't seem like I almost thought that he was using red herring, where he was distracting us, thinking like these are going to be the people, and then like they actually weren't, like, because they really didn't seem that bad. And I think as it goes further, we really start to see who they truly are, especially with their background, and we're starting to understand more how they differ. And I also think that we should focus on the end of even how they differ when they get caught. And I also was wondering why Dick stuck with Perry for so long, because that really surprised me. At the end of our section, he talked about how he was how it was time to separate from Perry, like right before the cops got to them, and I was like, finally, like, it's about time. It feels like he was already been annoyed with him for months since the killing of the Clutters, and I was just surprised that Dick didn't, leave Perry on his own. Why do y'all think he didn't? Do y'all have any ideas on that?
Do you want to go over here?
Well, I can't answer that. I was also going to branch off, but
branch off.
Oh, okay. I'm going to answer.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to answer. On page 128, if you guys go to that, it's you noted it yesterday, Amelia. It says, as I said before, Perry likes to be his own boss, and if he's given a chance to work at a job he likes, tell him how you want it done, then leave him alone. He takes great pride in what he's doing in his work, and I think that's why he stayed with Dick for so long, because I think Dick was his boss in a sense. I mean, they were partners, but it was less of a partnership and more of, I think Dick, in Perry's mind, became the role of a boss. And I think when he started doing things that Perry didn't agree with, which in the next sentence says, but don't get tough with him. And I think when Dick started doing things that Perry was disagreeing with, like sleeping with little girls and doing stuff he shouldn't have been doing, like, that was in a sense getting tough with Perry, because Perry disagreed with it. And I think that's why Perry was, in a sense, starting to crack and, feel guilty. And I think that's also why he's more normal than Dick, because Dick had no sympathy for the fact that he, did murder. Like, it was murder for an innocent family. And I think Perry had a more sentimental attachment, and I think Capote really enunciates on that. Or elaborates on that in this second third of the book.
I think.
Yeah.
Definitely second third of the book, we see how the two of them are so different. Like you said, how Harry needs like a boss, someone to follow. He definitely found that in Dick, and Dick was definitely the like commanding officer of the operation, you could say.
Yeah.
And I think he kind of took advantage of Perry. That's why they stuck together for so long, is because Dick had an accomplice that like would do something for him and like would be fine with it. He went with murder. Like Perry didn't even, because I remember sometimes it said he didn't think that he could actually go through it, and sometimes he didn't even believe that he still went through it.
Mm-hmm.
But because Dick said, "Oh, this is a good idea," we do it. We do it. There's money. Blah 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 blah. Then he went through with it. So they stuck together so that Dick could have someone to like be like, "Hey, go do this," and do it, because he needed that boss. And before Dick, it was Perry's fault, who he saw as his boss, kind of.
Yeah.
And then they lost their connection after their big fight, which then caused him to seek another boss, which turned out to be Dick. So I feel like without their big fight, Perry might not have murdered these people, because he still would have had a good bonding relationship with his father, and that instance would have been his boss, and he probably would have gone back to the lodge that they were building and owning, and they would have been fine. But because of that fight, it ended up that he was in jail.
Yeah, I agree. I want to point out on page 214, it's when Dick was talking about how he was deciding to leave Perry before they were caught. Let me see if I can find the... here he goes. He said that was half the plot. The second half was, goodbye, Perry. Dick was sick of him. His harmonica, his aches and ills, his superstitions, the weepy, womanly eyes, the nagging, whispering voice. He said that he would just say nothing and just go. He was just going to leave him. So obviously, this relationship between the two it's not good. It's not like they're not friends in any sort of way. They're just kind of like work buddies, I guess you could kind of say. Like that boss employee kind of relationship. And so also on that, I want to talk about when they were caught. I think that's a really big part of the second third, on how they were caught and the interrogation process. So I thought it was really interesting the way Capote revealed this process, because he has different sections in the book, and this one's called Answer, and he starts it with the guy who knows about the murder, who the murderer is, which is Floyd Wells. So he says that he was inmates with Dick, and that he worked for the Clutter family, and then he told Dick about the Clutter family and revealed that they were rich and had a lot of money, and then Dick said that he was going to kill them, but obviously Wells was like, didn't think he was really... Yeah, he thought it was jail talk, like you hear tons of that, and that's what he described. And I would like to discuss that, because the murder didn't look like a robbery, but it sounds like here that was the intention, was robbery. So what do y'all think about that?
He made it, Wells made it sound like Dick got interested because Dick kept saying, ooh, are they rich? How big's the house? What does it look like? How do you get there? Whatever. So it made him sound like he was looking for the money, and he murdered them specifically because of the money. But when we look at the details, the only things missing were the radio and
binoculars.
The first. So I think Dick's first intention was to make it a robbery, but then I think he's also just messed up, I guess you could put it, that he enjoyed it. And so, because the way that Mr. Clutter died, I feel like that was more than a robbery. Like, it almost seemed like an interrogation.
Personal.
Because
it seemed personal.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like personal. So I feel like he did it almost for the enjoyment, because there wasn't much taken. They didn't have much money off of what they took. So there had to be something else behind it. I think we might learn more about it as they get interrogated more. It might spill out why they didn't necessarily. But it almost
I do want to.
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
No, I just wanted to add on to what you said. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Oh, okay. So, actually, add on to a couple things that both of you said. So, Amelia, you were talking about how you saw it as more of a work buddy relationship, and I think at first it was not a friendship, but I think there was more there than just strictly business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think after this murder went down, it was less of a partnership and more of a, okay, now I have to stick with him because I'm guilty and he's got this on me. You know what I mean? It was more of a, like, an obligation and kind of a punishment almost to Barry. And also adding on to what you said, Avery, shoot, I forgot. I lost my train of thought. But you were talking about, oh my God, what?
We were talking about the honey in the house.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the Clutters had, they said, Capote described it at the beginning of the book that Mr. Clutter only used checks. Even if it was something as simple as $1.25.
I think that's so
Even
important.
if it was something as simple as like $1.25, like he would write a check for it, and then so it's weird to me how Dick felt the need, like when he was going through their stuff, like you could tell obviously that he didn't have the right information, and I think I'm thinking too fast. Okay, so he obviously didn't have the right information because he went in there and they're rich. Oh, we need to find this safe, and there can't be a safe if there's no money, because if all he uses is checked, obviously there's nothing there. And then when all they took was, like you said, Avery, just binoculars, like, it's just...
something does not add up.
Mm-hmm. And then about how Mr. Clutter's murder was personal, I think that, because his was the most brutal of all of them, right? It was the, like...
Definitely.
It just, like you said, it seemed personal. And I think because he was crazy, I think that goes back to the whole how Dick got bored thing, his boredom. I think he was just like, well, we came all the way out here and there's no safe.
Might as well.
Why not? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just think I don't know.
Anything else to add about the money? Because there's another topic I want to discuss. We good?
Go for it.
Okay.
Go for it, yeah.
We should talk about Dewey, because I think obviously Capote uses so many people from Holcomb to talk about how they're affected by this murder, because it's a small town, nothing ever happens like this there, but I think Dewey, besides Nancy's boyfriend her friend that's obviously so affected by it, his family is really affected by it too, because he's so hung up over this murder case. Like, he describes how he feels like he knew the Clutter family, like knows now the Clutter family better than they knew themselves, and he's like up and he's sleeping at his office, like it described that, and his family's scared, and his wife is upset because he's working all the time. And I just want to talk about how it affected him, because I think that's really important, because I think Capote wants to explain as like a theme in the story that a murder affects other people besides just the victims, you know? How tragedy really affected this town and really made this small town like a really scary place. Fear just blew up, you know? People were like, some people, members and families were up 24/7, like like taking turns, so one person was awake the entire time in the house. And I just wanted to discuss how Dewey's family, and Dewey especially himself, was affected by it.
He was definitely affected heavily. I was going to say extremely heavily, but I don't think that's okay. Very heavily, because he felt like he owed it to his town and to the people and to the Clutters to find out who murdered them. So he spent every waking moment on this case. That's why he said like he knew the Clutters better than they knew themselves. And I personally was really relieved once they like heard the story from Wells, because they were so lost. They started to offer rewards to anyone who had any information, and they were questioning as many people as they possibly could, anyone who ever worked for the Clutters. And so when Wells finally came up with that information about Dick, I felt very relieved, I guess, for Dewey, because that was going to be like his break. But I also feel upset with him like for the time before that, because of his family. Like his wife was so scared she couldn't sleep. They had kids. They were worried about them the whole time. And then Dewey wasn't there because he was in his office all the time working. And then once they got, I forgot exactly what she said, but they got the pictures of Dick and Perry, and Dewey showed his wife. His wife was like so upset about it. She was like, I wish you hadn't shown me these, because she was already thinking about it so much. Now she actually had a face to put to the murder, and now she'd never be able to get those faces out of her mind. I thought that was so strong, that she was so concerned about this and thinking about it all the time, and that then she was going to go on, even though there was possible relief going to happen that they might catch them. She was still had this strong like be next. She was just worried. Everyone in the town was. But also, I'm just going to quickly add that I know I felt like relieved for him once they found out about Dick and Perry, because of Capote's characterization and like pathos, because he used it to like grab my emotions so that I could connect to the characters because of his great characterization altogether. And that was like the main thing that he got or at least in my opinion, how he connected me with the book, was through the characters and explaining their lives and how they felt about it. And yeah,
I agree. I think your mentioning of Dewey's wife is really important, because it shows that people involved in the case, their families are involved with it as well, and how it's months after this murder and they're still being affected.
I think also I kind of want to, similar but like kind of branch off a little bit. At the end, he Capote like closes. Well, he doesn't really close because it's not really a chapter, but the second third, kind of towards the end of what we were supposed to have read, when they catch them, and like you said in the first discussion, Amelia, they were talking about because it's such, the story's kind of based off, it's a true story, the way the detectives caught them. I don't know I don't think we talked about this yet, but the way that they caught them was they didn't mention the Clutter case at all until like the end, and I really like the way that they did that, because the detectives were the one that came up with this. This isn't Capote's like fictional. He didn't make this up. This is real. They like went all the way out there, and they asked for his entire story, and they're spelling it out, like, because they think it's just something as simple as parole. They broke parole, and okay, here's the cops. We have to tell them our story. And he's got such a great memory, and he's able to spell it out day by day, and you wouldn't catch it if they didn't know, because of the information they had gotten from that prison mate. Yeah. And who just thought it was prison talk. And then after they spelled it out, and then his story kind of had a little hiccup there, they were like, well, I guess you wouldn't think that we would drive all the way out here for something as simple as breaking parole. Have you heard of the Clutter case? And then it's just like, at that moment, it's just such a, like a mic drop almost. It's like, okay,
Here we go.
It says, suspect underwent an intense visible reaction. He turned gray, his eyes twitched. And this is talking about Dick, and because he goes, "Have you ever heard of the Clutter murder case?" And they back on page 213, it says the name Clutter has to hit them like a hammer, a blow they never knew was coming, because obviously these guys, or at least Dick, not so much Perry because he doesn't have as much experience, I would say, in crimes, but they're skilled. They're gonna, like, they have this whole plan that if they get caught, this is the story. So obviously the cops are aware of this, and they got to come up with this skillful idea of how to crack them. So I think that this way was just really perfect, and reading it was like it's so suspenseful. But I want to talk about the way they interrogated Perry. It was slightly different. They talked about their past. For 2 or 3 hours they're like questioning them, and it says he says, "Listen good, Perry, because Mr. Dunce is going to tell you where you really were that Saturday night, where you were and what you were doing." Dunce said, "You were killing the Clutter family." Smith swallowed. He began to rub his knees. So all of this like description of how they're reacting obviously are giveaways of that they're guilty, and I think it was just really I'm repeating myself, but it was just really smart the way they did this.
Yeah, for sure.
It was kind of like a slap in the face to Dick and Perry.
It really was.
If I'm being honest, it's like, okay, you thought we were here for parole, blah blah blah. I'm gonna let you speak. You can tell me everything, and then, oh wait, just kidding, we have you on murder charges. But they also did that to their families. Like when they went to talk to them, they're like, blah blah blah, where has he been, blah 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 blah, and they didn't mention like the word murder at all. They didn't say anything about your son could be a potential murderer. Like we need to know where he is because of that. They just said, he's breaking parole, which I thought was a little weird, to be honest.
Me too.
Because I was like, well, for one, I thought it was like the law. You had to say why you wanted them, but I guess it's not. And then
it's a different time.
Yeah, but and then I don't know, because I feel like if the detectives had said, they were wanted maybe for murder, I feel like their reactions would have been different. So even though I did think it was weird, it was smart for the detectives to do that, because if someone said your son might be wanted for murder, a parent could be like, I'm not telling you anything then.
Yeah.
Whereas they said something about parole, they just went on about their life, and they're like, they're not a bad person, I swear. But they got more information through that, which was pretty genius.
On page 227, it's when Perry's in his cell and he's freaking out because they're now being accused of murder. He is thinking, and he says, Dick was smart, a convincing performer, but his guts were unreliable. He panicked too easily. So I think this might be a surprise, because I always thought that Perry was going to be the one to crack. But from here, saying that Dick panics really easily, it might be Dick that actually gives this away. I think it's very possible. But, obviously they know they killed them, but, they didn't crack under...
Who's going to be the one?
Yeah, who's going to be the one to officially confess,
It's funny because it...
Go.
I'm sorry. I think you already said this, but it made, throughout this whole... the 2/3, just the way that Perry has been described, kind of makes it sound like he would be the one to spill, because he has, actual feelings of regret about the murder. But, your quote that you just mentioned makes it sound more that, no, wait, Dick was actually the one who gave it away.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be cool to see the third.
Do y'all want to talk about, before we wrap this up, some ethos, pathos, and logos?
Sure.
Because I think that Truman Capote uses this throughout his novel.
A lot.
He
makes use of all of them.
All of them.
Throughout.
Logos. He needs the facts. I've read a little bit about this, and he was like in on these interviews with Dick and Perry, not specifically these, but I think some after, and so obviously he has a ton of logos because he's telling this nonfiction book about this murder. Ethos, because he establishes.
Plus, he's getting like a first perspective.
Yeah,
from it,
he is.
Hearing it.
That's credibility. That's ethos. But I think the most important thing, at least for me, is pathos, because I'm becoming so attached, and I feel bad for all these people being affected by it. But then I'm like confused at these murderers, because Harry doesn't seem like he'd be one, but then he's also at sometimes really psychotic, and Dick all around is just kind of a bad person. But he doesn't really have a bad background. He has this family, and that really confuses me too. So Capote is so strategic in this entire novel. The way he lays everything out, the order he reveals everything to the audience. It's not really chronological. I mean, it is chronological, but it goes back a lot, and it switches to different people that sometimes some are ahead or behind than others, you know what I'm saying? Like, it jumps around more, and you would think that would make it more confusing, but it comes together as you go forward,
Very well written.
Thanks.
I just know I'm looking forward to reading, finishing the book and seeing, how he finally gives us the answer that we're looking for,
Me too.
Mm-hmm. I think altogether, he's just his way of putting it together is genius. He keeps us on the edge of our seat by giving us I think we've called them chapters, but they're not really chapters. They're just little segments of the story, bits and pieces. So once we get to an exciting point of one story, he'll cut it off and he'll jump to a different story, and then we'll get to an exciting and that one cut it off and he'll jump to a different one. One of my reviews that I got says it pretty perfectly. It said the sentence that I highlighted was, "What remains remarkable." Wow, that was not in English. What remains remarkable about it, even in a market suffused with narrative history, is Capote's groundbreaking ability to fuse fact with the hard-won fiction. Wow, that was hard to read. So It's saying that he can fuse the fact with the fiction, which there's any fiction, but he just makes it like a novel and makes it sound like fiction or a story, which is pretty genius. And he uses ethos, logos, and pathos in order to fuse it all together and make it what this thing just said. It affected the rest of murder, mystery stories, investigation books from here on out.
My review talked about his strategy too, and you're talking about his way that he put this together, this nonfiction. But mine also talks about the theme. It says, by concentrating not only on the facts of the case, but also delving deep into the minds of those involved in the case, Capote blurs the conventional distinctions between good and evil. And this was a review made by San Jose State University by Yevgeny Meba. Butchered that a little bit, but that's okay. It's really that he really focuses, because there's multiple themes in this book, but that line between good and evil, that it's not that. It's not, I said this last night too, it's not this Disney movie. It's not, there's easily good and bad, and you know who you like and you know who you dislike. But this whole time you're just you're questioning yourself. Conflicted with yourself, exactly. So I think that's the true nature of American violence, is that if nothing is black and white, nothing is right or wrong. There's this gray area, and that's what Capote is delving into, this gray area, and he's trying to point out all the facts and for the audience to make their own decisions about people. And I think it's a really strategic way of doing it, and it makes the book really interesting as well. So, anything else?
No, I think this is a good closing point. Oh, Avery, unless you have something to say.
I was just going to say, should we say what we are looking forward to in the third? But this is a pretty good closing.
We can do that real quickly. I'm looking forward to, hopefully, I really hope so, I don't know if he does, details about the murder. I want to know, like, specifically, like, from their point of view, that how they did it, because we know the order of how they were killed, but I want to know, like, why he chose to kill the woman first, why Mr. Clutter's brutal murder was more brutal than the other ones.
So horrific, yeah.
And I want to know why they did it ultimately, because money is just not a good enough answer right now for me. Maybe it'll be explained where it is the actual answer, but it doesn't make sense to me right now, so I want to know. Anyone else?
You want the dots to be connected. I want everything to make sense, and it doesn't yet. Yeah. But I think he'll explain it all.
Me too.
I see this. It sounds kind of gruesome, but I want to see or read the details of the murder and see their perspective of it. And they entered the house and then they did what. I also want to see their mindset of why they did it and see why Perry joined Dick all of a sudden was yeah, let's go murder these people. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. But that's basically what y'all said. Something that you didn't. I think it's gonna be cool if he mentions how the town reacts after they realize it wasn't someone who was from there.
Ooh, yeah.
So we can see how does it go back to normal, or is it still they're still a little shaken up about it, which they probably will be. But I think it'll be cool to see how
maybe some of that fear will go away.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he'll tell about the murder through the Clutter perspective, Mr. Clutter waking up and hearing people in the house, maybe, or something like that. I think that'd be interesting. But
that would be interesting. I don't think that'd be more fiction because he couldn't get it instead.
But at the same time, there was parts in this book where the people are the Clutter family's by themselves. So obviously, he has a ton of accounts. But maybe he will, maybe he won't. You're making a good point. He probably won't, but maybe. Anyways. This was our second discussion of In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. We hope you enjoyed, and join us for the third discussion when we are complete with the book. Thank you.